The panel is Reyna, Atkins, Miss Bitcoin, and Herman. Round of applause, please.
One, two. Hola, hola. Guys, can you try that mic? Hey, guys. Thank you for the patience. We'll be with you shortly.
1, 2, 1, 2. Here we go. Nice. Just put my pocket here because. All right. All right. 21st century problems over. Okay, are we ready? Excellent. So, let's talk about the theme at hand, and each one of us in line, tell us what about yourself and what you do generally. Starting with Herman. Tell us about yourself, Herman, and what is it you do generally? We know you work for a Bitcoin, so you can just expand on that.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Yeah. Sorry. So I've been with Bitrefill for 7 years, and I'm responsible for our activities here in El Salvador, and also I am responsible for our content, which is all the gift cards, all the suppliers that we have on our platform. That's my generalist job.
Super interesting, and we know Bitrefill is very, very successful, and being in this business for 7 years is the part of that proof that you are successful, and we are big fans of you. Make no mistake. And so, Alejandra, you pass the mic over.
What do we do?
The question was, tell us about, well, everybody knows who you are because we all know who you are. But tell us about yourself and what you do generally. We know what you do, but just riff off of that. What is it you do generally to do with everything that we're talking about? Exactly.
Well, last year I started to go to public schools and teach kids about Bitcoin and how money works, because here in El Salvador, Salvadorans, they do not use a lot Bitcoin because they do not understand. That's something that I always say, that the government should have put some education before putting Bitcoin as legal tender. So I started to do these and also go to different conferences and see how the Bitcoin adoption was in different countries. And right now, what I'm trying also to impulse is to have like more projects and classes online for free, of course, for all the kids here in El Salvador, and well, not only in El Salvador, but around the world.
I think this is a very, very useful role to be playing because the education part is a very important part. We can't just assume that people are going to just know what Bitcoin is and how it's good for them. So somebody has to go and talk to them, reassure them it's simple, and that's how we're going to win in the end. So I personally applaud the work that you're doing very much. And now,
We'll see if now it works.
it's working?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so now Reyna, can you tell us what did you do and about yourself generally? So can you tell us about who you are and what is it you do generally?
So generally, I'm work with Mi Primer Bitcoin. I lead the educational department where we create programs to teach introductory Bitcoin education in El Salvador, and our programs are open source, so anybody in the world can download and use them and teach.
Excellent, absolutely excellent. And all the things that you're doing, can they be moved to other countries so that the work doesn't have to be reinvented again? Can you do the same thing in other countries that you do here?
I believe it is possible. We just need to make sure that we understand everybody's context. In El Salvador, we have the legal tender context. So it is easier for us to, teach, and also so people learn how to pay. We use Bitrefill a lot, but we have all these platforms and options. But if someone in Africa or Indonesia, where it's illegal to pay with Bitcoin, wants to do it, they get creative. Our materials, that's why they're still introductory, and we want to stay that way. There are so many people more doing amazing projects. Just want to refer them. The Bitcoin community is collaboration and not competition, and everybody else is doing a great job. And when we focus on what we do the best, everybody thrives.
Absolutely. I think it's a fine strategy, and I'm looking forward to seeing activities like yours and functions like yours moving into other territories, because the same problem is faced by everybody. Now, that moves us quite nicely onto the biggest challenges that are facing consumer adoption. I can tell you from our point of view that the education part is a big part of it. But what is Bitrefill? What are the kind of challenges you're facing?
Yeah, I think as a business, we are always challenged to find new customers. We know there's a lot of people out there in the world that own Bitcoin and save in Bitcoin, hodl Bitcoin. But our challenge is, how can we reach them and encourage them to live on Bitcoin? I think that's like we are in this niche business where we are encouraging and making it easier for people to live on Bitcoin. And that is a small market of all the Bitcoiners. So we're there trying to educate and convince people and encourage people to live on Bitcoin and essentially go bankless or help people who don't have bank accounts to live on Bitcoin.
Exactly right. And the number of people, the addressable market is actually very big. And so there's plenty of space to grow into. And we're relying on companies like Bitrefill to do it properly, to show us how it should be done. And so I have a great deal of empathy for what you're doing. It's a very difficult job. And so, Alejandra, what are the challenges facing the consumer adoption, in your opinion, given the work that you're doing? What kind of feedback do you get from people about what challenges they're facing?
Okay, first of all, like I said, they don't have any education on it, and also I will say that in some Latin countries, a lot of people still they don't have a phone. So how can they have access to Bitcoin if they don't even have a mobile or Wi-Fi? So first of all, I will say that those will be the main challenges, and also there should be more education about finance, not only at university, but in elementary, junior high school. I think it's very important for kids to start learning that since they're like little ones, so they can start saving and know how finances work.
Exactly right. And I don't think this kind of financial education has been a part of the government education systems all over the world. Money is just taken for granted as something that just exists, and people don't learn what the nature of money is. And I think what's happening with Bitcoin is that education about what money is spreading. And so what you're doing, I think, is very important as a base layer, a base level starting point to help people understand why Bitcoin is good and why they should try their hardest to use it. And as for the people not having smartphones, this is a big problem. But we have Machankura has a company that helps people get on board with these lower power phones. And so that problem is going to be taken care of as well. But the education part is absolutely key. And so, if we go on to Reyna, we know what your organization is doing in terms of helping in education, but what can government advocacy and public policy do to help consumer adoption of Bitcoin?
I will say try to keeping it simple, try to keeping it accessible and digestible. Everything that when new people and beginners hear about Bitcoin, they just think about something super difficult and impossible to understand. And when normally we ask the people, do you know how the internet works? They normally don't know how the internet works, but they know how to use it. And if something as easy as a voucher, a card to pay, a wallet like custodial is a journey. So I will say that the policies, and even ourselves as educators or people trying to bring in impulse adoption, is making sure that we understand everybody's level and don't want to impose. So education, it is important, absolutely, but sometimes people don't want to go through a 10-week program course. You just need to make sure that it solves a problem for you. So just come and making it real. Just make a flyer. This is the next steps. Make a couple of captures, how to download this and how to use it. And people is going to start using it. Everybody learns in a different way and have different needs. So if you want to come with all Bitcoin Maxi and this is amazing, we know Bitcoin is cool and amazing and the best money we ever had, but someone doesn't have the time to worry about that. They have kids, they have families, and they need to just move on with their life, but we want them to also use Bitcoin. So in the little time that they have, they're going to learn when they're ready.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important that this learning be as natural as possible so people don't feel like they're going to a lecture. And I think how you present these problems, how you present these services is very, very important. And so, Herman, in each jurisdiction is different. And so if we're talking about Europeans or Nigerians or Americans, the approach to how the government can help, in some countries they can't help. They can only hurt. So given that you're working from the EU, I believe, what do you think the government should be doing in, for example, the EU? What can they do other than doing nothing to help adoption of Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a good that's a good question. Before coming to El Salvador, I was an elected politician in Sweden for 10 years. And I was both on the opposition side for 5 years and then in the ruling party for 5 years. And I think as a politician, as governments in Europe particularly, I think one thing is countries need to normalize Bitcoin. They need to engage with it. They need to adopt it in their way of thinking and not be antagonistic against it. I think that's now number one. I think and that's obviously now in Europe you have the MiCA regulation, which helps regulate or helps actors like us know where the boundaries are, so we can develop apps and services for Bitcoin, feeling more comfortable that we are doing the right thing by the law. So that's a big step. I mean, in Europe, that has allowed us at Bitrefill to launch a reloadable Visa card as a business, and that helps adoption a lot. Because I think people in Europe, they might be sitting with Bitcoin, but they don't really know how to spend it and where to spend it. And that's, if government and countries start acknowledging that this is an opportunity for citizens, whether they're migrants coming and they want them to adopt into the new country that they've come into, or like El Salvador. I mean, El Salvador is doing a fantastic thing, in my view, by normalizing it, by actually talking about it, investing in it. And I think what El Salvador can do is to make it so that people in El Salvador see the benefit of using it. That could be, okay, you can pay your IVA tax or your VAT in Bitcoin. And if you do that, you pay maybe 2% less, or there's a discount. There's some incentive for me as a business here in El Salvador to adopt Bitcoin in my everyday operation.
And I think you bring up a very, very interesting point. This MiCA regulation that's come up is one approach that government can take by making Visa less reluctant to work with you. And the other is what's happening here in the Bitcoin country, where the government makes it legal tender. And so, Alejandra, which one do you think is better in general terms? Making it legal tender, or the kinds of laws that we're seeing in the EU, where they're making things more restricted, but easier for companies to do integrations with Visa and things like that? Personally, I think the way things are happening here is better. Because if Bitcoin is legal tender, nobody's going to be frightened of using it. So what's your position on how the government should regulate Bitcoin?
To regulate.
Yes, to regulate it.
How they should.
Say again?
How they should.
Yes, how they should or should not.
Well, I think if they regulate it, then what's the point of being decentralized? No? So for me, that I'm looking for financial freedom, I would say that they shouldn't regulate Bitcoin. Like here in El Salvador, they did the Chivo wallet. So they only Salvadorans can have it because they ask you for your DUI, that it's the national ID. And at the end, that wallet, the government can have access to it and they can see how much Bitcoin do you have, you know. So for me, I would say that it should be completely decentralized and all of them should use decentralized wallets. If not, then what would be the point of it?
Well, there are many people, including me, that agree with you 100%. On the other hand, I tend to see that the people who work in government have their own priorities and their requirements. And so we have to find some way of working with them. Otherwise, there's going to be trouble. And nobody on this panel, I think, wants trouble, for sure. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to double question you now. And so I'm going to give you the next question so you can do two in a row. So how would you measure the success or failure of Bitcoin in the next 5 to 10 years? It's an open-ended question, but 5 to 10 years.
When Bitcoin hits 1,000K, 100K, so it's going to be very soon. I think a lot of countries will see that El Salvador is doing great, and I'm sure that they will think about adopting Bitcoin as well because they will want to have their store value in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think the Bitcoin reserve that's happening here is the kind of thing a leader country does. We know now that the United States is trying to copy El Salvador in having an official reserve of Bitcoin. So very much, this country is a leader country in the world. And it's very gratifying to see. And so in our part as Azteco, we're doing everything we can to support what's happening here because it's very, very important. And so I'm going to look again. So Reyna, in the next, actually, no, you got the microphone, Herman, so you can do it. So in the next 5 to 10 years, how would you define success or failure for the Bitcoin ecosystem?
Well, I've been using Bitcoin since 2016, and I think it is winning all the time. I mean, maybe I'm naive, but I don't see it failing really. But it's winning all the time. It's just constantly taking a few wins here and there, and it's continuing to do that. I think we're seeing now what happens in the U.S. That's a small win for Bitcoin. Obviously, El Salvador was a win for Bitcoin. I think as countries start to adopt it more, it continues to win. I think a big thing for me would be if money flowed freely around the world on Bitcoin. That would be a huge win for Bitcoin, because that's really where I see the big hurdle is people can't move money around the world freely today using the financial system. But if Bitcoin helped to alleviate that, which it does, but it's still a little bit too difficult to use it for the person who's not an orange pill Bitcoiner. But if financial institutions or any other services allow for money to be moving freely around the world using Bitcoin, that's a huge win.
I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation. And there's two parts to this problem. The first part is the technical part, which is more or less easy to do. And then the second part is the education part. Because you can build anything. If people don't know about it, are not educated about it, nothing can happen. So these two things must work in conjunction to make this happen. So Reyna, in the next 5 to 10 years, how would you measure the success or failure of Bitcoin in general?
I mean, I think it's success also, you define it, right? You define success. Is it more people accepting Bitcoin? Is it more people knowing about it, but just holding? To me, that's not success. If everybody just holds the Bitcoin, what's the point? I read a tweet the other day from Lara from Bitcoin Explorers that somewhere there is a merchant right now that holding to the Bitcoins because someone decided to spend their sats with them, local merchants, and they see now what a real deflationary money looks like. So I will say I also don't see it as a failure. I think there are pros and cons with the price going up. It is tricky. We see it here in El Salvador. It creates FOMO. We see when the price goes up, everybody wants to learn. Everybody is, when do you have classes? But it's just making sure that you keep it real, that you explain to people, when you don't know something, just better don't get into it. You explain to people what really happens with the cycles of Bitcoin so they don't see you as a fraud. So I will say that success is going to look like people taking agency in their own life, understanding Bitcoin principles, humanistic principles that centered about human dignity and potential. That to me is what success will look like. I do believe El Salvador is in that road, in that path, thanks to different initiatives, and it's going to be an example, for better or for worse. We are trying to make it the best example possible. I see it as a success because I'm at this conference, which is really, really high signal. This is people trying to build. Every panel that you see, it's someone from their frontier trying to impulse Bitcoin adoption, and everybody has really great integrity. Nobody here is trying to scam you, and that to me is already a success.
So I think I can agree with 100% of that. And now I'm going to do what I did to Alejandra, let you do 2 in a row. If you had to choose one thing from this conference, except for this panel, what would be your favorite event in this whole event?
Favorite? You mean to share?
Yes.
Yeah. I will say, let's remember that adoption and Bitcoin education looks different for everybody, for kids, for teenagers, for adults. So always remember that Bitcoin solves a need for someone somewhere. So if you want to come with all the education and the technical part and that they need to understand 0 to 100, and you're not going to drive Bitcoin adoption. You're going to drive Bitcoin adoption by having empathy that someone is new and someone is in a middle way and someone is all the way in very, very, already into the rabbit hole. And always try to meet the people where they at. So make sure that you keep empathy and that when you teach about Bitcoin, it's not coming from excitement that more people is gonna see who you are and know who you are. You're just trying to put a service to others. If you always remember that your services are serving someone to other, it's gonna come back to you, and that people is gonna remember what you teach them to share it. If you make them feel uncomfortable, nobody's gonna share what you're trying to educate.
Interesting, very, very interesting. Okay, Alejandra, what out of this conference was your best event, the best thing of this conference, the best thing that happened, except for this panel, which of course is the best?
That this conference was in the all-time high of Bitcoin. So that would be the best, and we all are gonna remember, and I hope that all conferences that we go is gonna be the all-time high.
I think we can give a clap for that one, 100%.
Yeah, I totally agree. The timing of the conference was very well made. I really can't point at a specific thing, to be honest. I think it's the 3rd year it's held here in El Salvador. I think it's fantastic that it becomes what it is, and I love the venue here. It's a very relaxed environment, and you had a chance to speak to a lot of people and go to see good talks. I really enjoy the one-on-one meetings with people in the industry that are coming from all around the world here and congregate into El Salvador. So it's always a fantastic event.
I think you're right. It's very useful to have a single place where you know everybody's going to be and people who you don't know are going to be that you can meet. And so I understand it's going to be another one. I guarantee you all are going to be at it. And thank you very much for the very enjoyable panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
That's it.